Thank you for coming to Customer Success First Office Hour. Today we're going over invoicing. Just to be clear, this will be recorded. I will post this later on our YouTube once it is downloaded. And then as well, we will have a Help Center article that will start listing our Customer Success Office Hour. So if you guys ever want to look back at it, you can. So we appreciate you coming. There is question and answer throughout the whole period, the whole webinar. As well, at the end of the webinar, if you could, if you have to leave early, totally understandable, but there will be a survey. We want to hear what our next customer success office hour will be. So that will also be linked into our email that's going to go out tomorrow for the survey. So if you could fill that out, we do take your, feedback seriously, and it'll help us to have our topic for the next customer success office hour. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce our customer success coaches. Some of you already know them. We have Zach Baumann, our customer success coach, and then we have Brian Helmick. So many of you do know them already. And then if you don't know who I am the Director of Community and Learning. I send out all those release notes you get. I am posting all the YouTube videos and then the knowledge base article. And I think some of you did come to the booth and I got to meet you in person. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. And also to your customer success coach, if one of your questions is not answered, but hopefully we can get to them all. So I'm going to kick things off to Zach. So thank you again for coming.
Good to see everybody. I see some of my builders here, so good to see you guys. Sorry I missed you at the builders show. I was taking care of my wife who wasn't able to take care or pick up our daughter for a couple days. So just to go over a little bit of our agenda for today. So we are talking about invoicing best practices. In this webinar, we're going to talk about fixed price and cost plus invoicing and the different scenarios that can come from those and the different types of invoicing that can be done. So we're going to talk about common workflows. We're going to talk a little bit about deposits and credits. We're going to talk about uncommon workflows. And if you guys have questions, we'll be keeping an eye out for those as well. And we'll have some Q&A time at the end. Brian's going to be talking about fixed price invoicing. I'll talk about cost plus. But first and foremost, we should talk a little bit about fixed price versus cost plus projects and kind of defining what those are. This can be kind of an overlapping area for a lot of builders. So with Ressio as our software, we talk about fixed price, meaning a kind of an agreed upon contract amount where the markups are generally built into the contract price. We are doing our invoicing from the original budget or from a flat dollar value, and then also doing invoices from changes, whether those be selections or change orders, or credits back, because you can, of course, do a negative selection or a negative change order. But the defining characteristic of a fixed price project is all-encompassing pricing, and we're invoicing the customer off of a predefined budget with revisions being added or removed as needed. And in Ressio, a cost-plus project is a project where we are basing our invoicing off of actual costs, so the bills and expenses that you receive, time as well as one of those, plus some sort of markup. And whether that markup is done as a percentage-based markup or a flat contractor rate for more of a hybrid model can vary depending on the builder. But really, we are saying whatever we spend, we add a fee on top of that in some way, shape, or form, and we invoice our customer off of those actual expenses. Or cost plus, also called open book in the industry sometimes as well. Fixed price can also be called lump sum very commonly. So now that we have defined what a fixed price versus a cost plus project in Ressio is, Brian is going to walk us through some fixed price invoicing models here and some common and uncommon scenarios that you might run into.
All right, let me go ahead and send over my, excuse me, let's handle the slide first. So just kind of going over the fixed price invoicing. Invoices are created in a couple different areas. Just kind of pointing these out. Number one, you can create an invoice on your budget page or from your invoices page. Either one works depending on what type of workflow you're going through. Then over there on the right of the screen, you may see our new invoicing. We have our invoicing types up there as well. So you can invoice by amount. That is essentially just creating an invoice from scratch, setting up random numbers. This is typically going to be used, maybe not random numbers, but just setting up the numbers that we need to get set up for our clients. This is typically going to be used when we are gathering our deposits at the beginning of a job, or when we're applying those deposits as we move through the job. We can also invoice via percentage on our fixed price jobs, and that is basically just going to have us pick a fixed percentage or amount from our estimate to invoice that over to our client. Finally, we can invoice from our changes. That's where we create invoices against, our change orders or any of our selections and the allowances and things like that. Just a quick note, these methods can be used independently in separate invoicing documents, or we'll combine all of them. Today, we're mostly going to look, especially from the fixed price perspective, as a combined unit on all of these. So without any further ado, if you guys are ready, we can go ahead and move into the system and get started.
I'll unshare my screen here for you, Brian, and you can take over.
All righty, I will take that over. Okay, so we've jumped into a fixed price estimate. Everybody can see my screen, correct? Remember,
Okay.
feel free if you guys have any questions or anything, get them into the Q&A section. Anything that's really poignant, we are going to stop, pause, and handle your question live. Anything that's, can wait till the end, we'll probably just push it off to the end. So let's jump in and take a look at first what we've got going on our estimate, because on a fixed price job, we will be billing against it. So I have got a job pretty small, $37,000 on this job. We've already kind of gone to contract. We've got our estimate locked. We've got a couple change orders in here too. Those are just sitting there waiting for us to work with. So let's kind of first get the first portion of our estimate done. What do we want to do? Well, in this case, let's show you how to get an invoice for a deposit. So I've got the $37,500 job here, and what I want to do is I'm just going to get half. Kind of a small job. Typically, you guys would maybe get deposits of 10%, 15, 20%. This is going to functionally work for no matter what your deposit amount's going to be. So to start this, I'm going to go ahead and invoice by amount. And it's going to give me my from scratch invoice. One thing to point out, we got two buttons down here to add other things later on, but for this invoice, we don't need that. We'll start with our line item. Let's give this a name. I'm going to go with project deposit. Next, I always want to have a deposit cost code for my deposits. This gives it a specific area on the budget page so that I can track how much I have in that deposit, what we've taken in, things like that, and keep up on how much money is left there. Because when that deposit is gone, everything comes out of pocket for my customer. Now, the whole job was $37,000. I don't want to do $37,000, right? I just want to do about half. So what's that? 16,125. And when we're working with deposits, one thing to always make sure, we never need to worry about a markup. We just want that deposit number. So once I've got this created, I'm essentially done for my deposit. I want to hit my save button, and that will add that to my invoice. I'm going to cover just a few small things on the invoice. There's a lot that you guys probably already know. Just remember, you got a pink banner at the top. If you didn't get your customer assigned, you can get that squared away up there. Descriptions are great for specific information to this invoice. Terms and conditions, you should have this filled with your standard contract information for your invoice as well. So we've got this set up for the project deposit. I've got a total on my invoicing summary. For this situation, I probably don't want to keep my budget summary on. We're just grabbing a deposit. So remember, you always have your settings over here on the right to show as much or as little as you need to show on one of your invoices. So I'm going to grab this deposit. I'll save it, and then I can release this to my customer. When you're releasing an invoice to your customer, just to point something out, if you're going to release the invoice from another system, you do not necessarily have to send them the Ressio invoice, and just unchecking this box will block that Ressio invoice from being delivered to them, but it will allow us to send that invoice to places like QuickBooks. So once my invoice has been released, obviously we'd probably wait a little bit of time. Eventually we collect that payment. If we're integrated with QuickBooks and we've taken care of that payment in there, it'll automatically update the status of my invoice in Ressio. But in this case, we're going to record the payment, and I'm just going to go ahead and get that in that we're paid in full for our deposit. Now that I've got my deposit in, I can start working on the other areas of the system. But first, I want to show you how this is going to show up on our budget page. I've got a project deposit cost code right here. And then one of the things I want to make sure that I look at for this is my invoicing summary. So you just want to make sure your invoicing summary is on from your column selector over there. Let's slide over to that invoicing summary and just explain why we want to see this. When I jump over to the invoicing summary, I can see that I've collected 16,125 on my job, and I know what is invoiced against that. This is going to be important as we start to apply the deposit to our next couple invoices. So it's time to invoice for a little bit more. Let's go ahead and get paid and do some work. Now, when we start our next invoice, we're actually going to move to the invoicing by percentage because I want to get a little bit of how much of this job we've got completed. So in this case, when I invoice by percentage, it's going to bring up a list of everything that I have on my estimate, separated out by the cost codes that we utilized, and allow me to start setting percentages on here. I have a slider over here to make sure that I can show anything that's been fully invoiced already. You can always flip that off as needed. Up here at the top is my percentage, so how much I want to grab. If I'm going to get 15% of the entire invoice, the entire estimate, I'll put 15 up here. I'll click my update button, and it'll update my invoicing amounts to 15% of that client price that we need. One quick tip. Let's say we're just doing invoicing and we only need to get the percentage of work that's complete. A fast way to handle that, pop a 0 up there, and then you can actually put in your percentages as you do, or as you go. So if this one's 100% complete, and this is 100% complete, and this is 100% complete, and those are the things that we would like to get invoiced, I can just add those to the invoice. Another quick tip as well. While I've got my amounts set up, I may only want to show the lines that I'm invoicing for. So you can control which lines pull to your invoice over here on the left. Unchecking one will take it off of that invoice, but just like with our update option, if you check right here, you can check everything off and then pull in just the lines that we are actually going to be invoicing for this time. Don't see any questions, but feel free to jump in and get some questions in there if you have any questions about what we've got going on. Since we're here, we're going to grab a little bit of this money, but I also want to go ahead and invoice for a change. Can I knock that out now? Absolutely. So I'll go down here to add from changes, and it'll load up a list of all the changes and selections that have been made on the project for me to get those added into my job as well. So now here are the changes that we can invoice for on this job right now. Number one, I've got my granite countertop. Well, we haven't installed that countertop yet. Let's not bother invoicing for those changes right now. So I can check right here and leave that off of the invoice. Down below, I've got my 2 change orders. I do want to go ahead and invoice for these as well. We're going to lower the price based off of one change order and add a little bit based off of the other. Why don't we just include the one that's going to lower the price for now, okay? And we'll see how that affects the final total of the invoice. So from my progress, I've got 11,625 on there. We're going to invoice for a change order where we're lowering the price by $1,500. And now I can click my save option because I can see my new total amount down here. Let's take a look at how the invoice looks once we have this built out. Keep in mind, we can always adjust our settings over here on the right. When I look at the top of the invoice for the items, I see from progress. So this is all of the progress, the percentages that I added at the very beginning of the job. Then we break out that we have that change order coming in, and that's applying that $1,500 credit, giving me my new total for my invoice of $10,125. My budget summary is accurate over here, just saying, hey, we've got some money coming out for approved changes and a remaining balance of about $11,000 on the project. If I don't need that budget summary, slide that thing off right there. You can always adjust any terms and conditions or descriptions, but at this point, I'm probably good to go ahead and release this invoice. Now that the invoice is saved, I can then fire it off to the customer. Again, remember, you can uncheck that if you don't want to send them the Ressio invoice, but our invoices are beautiful, so I would keep sending those. And as we get paid, we would jump in and record our payment against that invoice. Let's take a look at the invoices page to see how this is starting to stack up over there before we jump back and do our final invoice on this job. Invoices page. So we've got our 2 invoices in. One is our deposit invoice right here at the top. Our second invoice is obviously some of that money. We're still holding on to that deposit until we complete the job. But let's just jump ahead, fast forward in time, and imagine we're about to complete this job, and we need to go ahead and apply that deposit money to the invoice, as well as collect the rest of any balance remaining. So I can actually do this from my budget page right here. I'll do it there. And in this case, again, I'm going to select invoice from percentage. The system already knows that we've invoiced for 100% of several things. I can actually, again, that's where this button comes in important. I can see those things that I've fully invoiced for, but they're not going to come in. I need to get the rest of this project, and that's all marked at 100%. And then I need to get the rest of those changes in here too. I'm going to point something out here too, because we're going to invoice for a selection on this one as well. I'll point out that selection as needed, but that's that granite countertop. Notice it's not listed as a change order. And we're actually switching out to a Virginia blue granite from a traditional granite countertop. So there's a little bit of an adjustment in that price on this one right here, okay? Once these are added on, I can go ahead and hit my close button, but we've made a mistake. We've got a deposit we've got to return, right? Well, have we gone too far to do that? Absolutely not. Let's go ahead and get that deposit returned on here as well. So I'm going to head up here and use my edit option. And I'm going to click add additional items. Just like when we took the deposit, we will use the same feature to return the deposit. When we click add additional items, it will go ahead and give us our option again. You can choose whatever language you like to put in on this line, but I tend to call it applied deposit. I want to grab that project deposit cost code that we created again. And then I want to apply the amount. But here, I don't put a positive number. I'm going to start with a negative, and then I'm going to put in that $16,125 for my deposit amount. Make sure that I don't have anything. And just like we said when we took a deposit, same thing applies when we apply the deposit. You never want a markup on there. So just make sure if there is a standard markup populating in there, that we remove that markup. Now, we can see that we are applying $16,125 to an invoice that was a little bit higher, about $26,000, and it's giving us a net total of $11,000 that we have remaining. So once I get that saved, I can then come down and check out my invoices. We've got the remaining amounts from our progress. Then we've got our amounts from our changes added onto here. Notice that when we're doing our invoicing, our countertops, well, why do you see this here? And why do we see this here? When we do a fixed price invoice, we invoice for the entirety of the estimate and all of our changes. So what you're seeing is just this amount from the estimate, our original budget amount, getting credited back, and our new amount from our change being applied to the invoice here at the bottom. Our applied deposit shows up as our additional items for our $16,125. Feel free to add any files that you need, and then you're ready to release your invoice. Notify the customer. Before we take payment on this, let's go check out the budget page and see what we've got. Head back over to that budget page, slide on over to our invoicing summary, and I can see what we've got going on. So what we've collected on our earlier invoice, what's outstanding is over here. We have invoice for this, but we haven't collected on that yet. We've collected that project deposit. There's an outstanding amount. We've invoiced for 0. Why? Because that outstanding amount is on an invoice. It's zeroing out our number here. When we collect on our invoice, it'll update this a little bit more. So we'll just open this one more time. Collect our $11,000 difference from the end of the job. And then we can head back over to that budget page and see those updates for us. Oops. Invoicing summary. Now, when we head back over here, well, our project deposit, that's zeroed out. That's what we want. We don't have any money left in the deposit. We credit it back to our client on our final invoice. We have now invoiced for the entirety of the job at 100% of everything we needed, including any of our additions or changes that weren't inside of the budget. Everything's squared away, and we're ready to close this job and archive. While I'm working on this, and actually, while we're kind of done with this one, let's jump over, since I handled the kind of deposits, I'm going to start Zach's project off for him. Ooh, Zach, you got a question? You got something you'd like to add?
Yeah, one good question here from Alex Gregg was asking, on a fixed price invoice, can you turn off the line item totals?
Oh, yes. Let's jump in here and talk a little bit about that. I'm going to go back to one of my invoices. I've kind of fully invoiced for things. So what I'll do, I'm just going to create one at random. For instance, I'll go by percentage. I'm just going to show some fully invoiced items just so I can pull something into my invoice to have something on there. Let's just put, $1,000 or something on here. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this in a real job, but once I get that $1,000 onto my invoice and I can see that, if I turn off my line items right there, I can turn off all of them. But if I show that, I can turn off that, and I can click the totals to turn off the line item totals. So I can choose if I want to show a little bit more information under those line items. I can choose if I want to show totals. If I don't show the totals, well, I've got a total at the bottom or my
Yeah,
prices
so the
too.
nice thing there, Alex, is that just like you have flexibility with change orders and proposals and other document types, you can say, hey, I still want to tell the customer what I'm invoicing for in this invoice, but not show them the dollar values. Or you could show the category. Like you have a lot of flexibility here, as Brian said. Technically, you can hide all the line items and just show them an invoice that has a summary with the dollar value at the bottom. I wouldn't necessarily do that myself unless we're talking about like a deposit, but the description's really nice. But again, Ressio is incredibly flexible when it comes to how you collect money. Our goal at the end of the day is to make sure that you get paid, and how you present that information to customers and how you collect that money is kind of up to you with flexibility here. So,
Yep. All right. Hey, Zach, since you're the boss here today, I'm going to go ahead and get that deposit in on our cost plus job real fast, and then I'm going to let you take over for cost plus. So let's move over to our cost plus job. And let's go ahead and get a deposit. So again, very similar pricing on this one. In this case, let's just grab like a smaller deposit, enough for us to get started on our cost plus job, cover some of those early expenses. So I'll jump in, do my invoice, and I'm going to invoice via amount. Notice that our options changed a little bit. We have a new one, invoice from actual. Zach's going to go into that deeper on, but let's get this set up. Functionally, this depositing setup is going to work almost exactly the same, no matter whether we're on a fixed price or a cost plus job. So, project deposit. Give me my cost code, project deposit again, to make sure that that's accurate. And in this case, we had what, a 37.5 job. Let's get 10% to start. Just like with a fixed price job, we do not want any markups on this. Remember, when we apply our deposit, we end up capturing that markup back, applying the deposit anyway. So I got that set up. I'll save this. I can flip off all the things that I need to flip off or show as much as I want to show, whatever I need to get that squared away for my client. Let's actually flip off some of these things, make it really simple for them. We just have a project deposit of $3,750. I save it, I release it, I notify that customer so that I can get paid on it. And then, ooh, his project's integrated with QuickBooks. So in Zach's case, when I've released this, my invoice has headed over to our QuickBooks account tied to this project. And when we get paid for this deposit, we'll apply that payment onto that QuickBooks invoice, and that will automatically update our Ressio invoice. From here, Zach's got some bills to put in so that we can take this over. So Zach, I will go ahead and give you the screen share.
sounds good. I'm gonna grab the screen share here. And yeah, Brian, I did that on purpose to show what an invoice looks like when it's been released to QuickBooks. So sorry to confuse it there.
Oh, no confusion at all. It actually worked out great.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a minute here. So just sharing my screen again, we'll go through that slide real quick here first. So when we're talking about cost plus invoicing, we still have three options for invoicing within a cost plus project. However, realistically, we will only be dealing with two of them more often than not. And that is going to be by amount, which is traditionally used to take a deposit and credit it back, and from actuals, which are going to be from our actual bills and expenses. Now, the nice thing about Ressio is that those bills and expenses can originate in Ressio, or they can originate in QuickBooks, or land in QuickBooks from another third-party system like Adaptive or other tools that exist out there, bills.com, some of those things. But the nice thing is that no matter where our bills and expenses come from, they are considered actuals as long as we're syncing them in, and we're able to invoice off of those. From changes does still exist, and there are rare examples where you might want to collect a change order like as a deposit and then credit it back. It will function very much like a deposit and credit does, but it's very rare that we see that, but we do have it just in case. The nice thing is that, again, these are very independent. They can be done as separate invoices, or they can be combined just like with a fixed price project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to X out of my cost plus invoicing screen. I'm going to flip over to our cost plus project that Brian has so kindly done a deposit on for me. And as we can see here, we're looking at the budget table of our cost plus project in Ressio, very similarly built project. And we can see we have some applied actuals here. So in Ressio, applied actuals is the term that we use for job site expenses. Those are going to be things like time, bills, essentially any expense that we have on a project, credit card expenses, all those good things. And in order to do an invoice off of actuals, we just have to have some actuals. In Ressio, they become invoiceable when you approve them and sync them to QuickBooks, or approve them and leave them just in Ressio. In QuickBooks, as long as they're added as a billable expense, those will pull over. One thing to note there is we can pull over non-billable expenses as well, and I'll actually show you a little trick on how to leave those off of invoices. But just like in Brian's project where he collected a deposit, we can now see this project deposit cost code here. If I scroll over and look under my invoice summary, we have that payment outstanding and invoiced. It's outstanding because this invoice pushed over to QuickBooks, and therefore the payment record would be, or the paid record would be applied in QuickBooks and will automatically sync back to Ressio. So when we're doing those invoices for an invoice from actuals, my little tips and tricks that I do here. If you're entering your bills and expenses into Ressio, you don't need to worry about syncing expenses. I always just refresh the screen to make sure that I have all of my approved bills. One thing to note as well, when we have those bills being entered into Ressio, is there's actually an extra column here that we can add onto our budget table called all actuals. And the difference between all actuals and applied actuals is all actuals also shows draft bills and expenses as well. So if I want to make sure that all of my bills and expenses that I expect to be approved have been, we can go down the line here and make sure that those two columns add up. If we are entering our bills and expenses into QuickBooks, the thing that I often do is right before I go to invoice a customer, I hit the sync expenses button. And I do that on the budget table. And the reason that I do that is that while Ressio syncs with QuickBooks regularly throughout the day, this does an immediate sync for this one project, just saying, hey, make sure that I am 100% up to date on my expenses and that there's not something that was added 10 minutes ago that I forgot about. So I generally do all of my invoicing on a cost plus project from the budget page. I'm going to then generate my new invoice, and instead of by amount or from progress, I have from actuals. If this is grayed out, just like from changes is grayed out, that means we don't have any outstanding actuals to invoice for. So the nice thing about Ressio is that when we do invoices from actuals, once those bills and expenses have been added to an invoice, even a draft invoice, they can no longer be invoiced for because we don't want to accidentally double invoice for real bills and expenses. So we filter those out automatically. In this case, I'm going to do from actuals. That's then going to look at all of the expenses I have on my project. It's going to filter out any of the bills and expenses that have already been invoiced for, and it is just going to show me my outstanding bills and expenses with whatever level of detail I have in here. And then from here, I can decide, do I want to invoice for all of them? Do I want to leave some of these off by unchecking them for the next invoice? Or do I want to do a partial draw? And I'm going to show a partial draw here. I'm actually going to do just a 50% draw amount on that one bill because I'm going to show you guys how you can actually leave the other half of this off of an invoice in the future. So I'm able to do all of that here. If I have tax that needs to be applied, very rare, but it can be applied. We have our markups auto-calculating based on the markups on our project. And then because Brian has so graciously added a deposit in for me, I'm going to go to add additional items here, and I'm actually going to add in that additional deposit. Or credit back that deposit. So I'm going to credit back deposit. I'm going to use that customer deposit. What was that? Maybe client.
Project deposit.
Project deposit. Sorry.
Project deposit.
Helps if I just look for deposit. And one thing I like to note, it's a little bit different when applying the credit on cost plus projects versus fixed price projects, and you'll see why. But I actually do the credit as the negative of the draw amount subtotal pre-markup, and then I allow the markup to calculate on the other side. In this instance, it's a little bit of a rounding error there, so I can always make small adjustments if I need to. We'll move this down by a penny. Oops, closed that up. So that'll get us to 2175. Oh, shoot, I zeroed it out. Sorry about that. So that was a 5%. And so I'm just going to decrease that by 1 penny here or whatever amount I need to. The reason I do this, I'll leave this rounding error in here for now. So the reason I do this is that when I create the invoice to credit this back, if I don't have it calculate the cost and markup percentage, what's going to happen is in the summary at the bottom, it's going to show that $337 and change moving from subtotal to profit in the summary at the bottom rather than in the line on the estimate or on the invoice itself. And actually what I'll do here is I'm going to show you what it looks like if I don't do this. So I'm going to go ahead and do the full amount of 25, 12, 13. We will zero out the markups and then we can just kind of talk through what the other side of that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and do that credit back. We're going to have a $0 invoice total in this case because I'm applying the entire amount back. So it's just going to be a $0 invoice. And I'm going to save this here. And again, I'm just doing a 50% draw on this one so I can show you how we can leave this off a future invoice. So I'm going to hit save. And when I go to my invoice page here, what I'm going to see is I'm actually going to see that that 337.13 is being taken out of the subtotal and being applied to these markups here. That's only because I didn't calculate it on the actual line of the additional amount. If I do it that way, that information shows as a credit back to the cost and a credit back to the markups in line with the summary there. So just a little thing to be aware of. If you like it showing up in the invoice summary as opposed to in the line itself, you can leave it the way we've done it here. If you like it to show in the additional items here instead of in the invoice summary and you want this to zero out, you can do it that either way. Just something to be aware of. Because on a cost plus project, unlike a fixed price project, we are disclosing our markup and tax and fees. So it's just how that information kind of reports, and it's moving money from a general deposit to profit and subtotal. Well, just something to be aware of there. In this instance, I'm doing it's a negative invoice by a penny. I can fix those rounding errors if I need to, but I'm going to go ahead and just leave this invoice in draft. I'm not going to push it over to QuickBooks because I don't need to. But when I go back to the invoices page, I'm going to see I have an invoice outstanding for my deposit. I have an invoice open for that balance due. And I'll notice that when I go back to the budget table here, I have my collected columns will update, my invoiced columns will update, so I can go over to the invoice summary here, and I can show what we've invoiced for once we've released this invoice. I didn't release that one, but the same kind of workflows that we have for fixed price. Now in this case, a little thing I wanted to show everybody, a relatively new feature to Ressio, is that in cost plus projects, we have the ability to take individual bills or part of a bill and leave those off of future invoices. So in this instance, I can still do a new invoice from actuals because I have 50% of that one bill that I left off of that draw. If this is an instance where I don't want to invoice the customer for that amount, maybe I agreed to split the bill with the customer, what I can do is I can go into that individual bill and I have the ability from the bills page, whether it's a time entry, a bill in Ressio, or a bill from QuickBooks, to click the exclude from invoicing. If that has been fully billed for, like in this instance, it'll tell me, hey, this bill's already been invoiced for 100%, so that doesn't make sense. But if it was one that was partially collected, I believe it was the Collins Plumbing, if I remember correctly. So when I go to exclude that one, I can see this line item has already been invoiced for $125 of $250. If I choose to exclude it from invoicing, I'm essentially just leaving off the other half. So this is a way that you can have in a cost plus project, and this works if you want to exclude a full bill as well. This allows you to have a cost plus project where you can still sync in your non-billable expenses to have that full job costing and simply just omit those from invoices without having to put them onto a draft invoice like you did previously. So it's a really nice enhancement that allows you to do full job costing for non-billable expenses and not accidentally invoice the customer for those. So in this instance, because I'm excluding from invoicing, when I go to do a new invoice from actuals, well, hey, all of a sudden, it's grayed out now because I don't have any other outstanding actuals. The other half of that bill has been excluded. So in that instance, my collected and my applied actuals, when I actually collect that money, it won't fill in fully. It'll show collected at 125 and actuals at 250. So we just have all of that reporting available. Go ahead, Brian.
I had a really good question come across here. Jesse asked, is there a way to set up invoices to automatically put 0 for the markup?
Yeah, so when we set up a project, a cost plus project in Ressio, we simply, on the estimate page, I'm not going to have this because I can't change it. But if I go to the markup and tax rate, and please forgive our many, many, many markup and tax rates we have here, but all I would need to do is either not have a markup or tax rate or have the value for these at 0, and then there will be no markup applied. So when we're working on a cost plus project, the markups that are applied to those bills come directly from this project markups table. In this instance, I have two markups, a 5% overhead and a 10% builder fee. But if I had zeroed both of these out before I locked the estimate and set those in, my markups would always be default 0. This is really great if you're doing what I call a cost plus fixed fee project, which is another great use of additional line items, where I want the ability to do costs and invoice my customer for just the pure costs, and then have my fee be a flat fee that I tack on. And there are two ways to do that in Ressio. You can add your fee as a bill and have yourself as the vendor if you want it to show up in applied actuals. Or just like we handled that deposit workflow, I can simply, when I create a new invoice from actuals, and I'll go back to that one we have here, I would have the ability to simply say, well, hey, I'm going to add an extra line item on here for contractor fee, and let's say it's project management of $15,000, and maybe I don't mark this up as well. So we'll zero out the markup here. And so essentially what that's doing is I am doing or accommodating for a billable non-expense. So the way that this shows up is just like the deposit and credit, where it doesn't show up as an applied actual. It shows up just as something you've invoiced for. And just for those of you who are curious about how this shows up in QuickBooks, it'll show up under the same cost code. It'll show up on the invoice, but it won't show up as a service income. It will actually show up as sales income because it is a line item that's been added to an invoice rather than a line that's been added directly related to a bill. So hopefully I got ahead a couple of those QuickBooks questions there because that's always a fun area. But as you can see, cost plus invoicing, very flexible. We can invoice for deposits and credit those back. We can invoice for actual expenses wherever they come from. And in rare occasions, we can also invoice for changes and credit those back like we have in case you need to take a deposit for a change order. We can also handle billable non-expenses, just manually adding line items onto an invoice if we want to. So a lot of flexibility there.
I just want to circle back really fast to one more point about the markup situation and how markup kind of differs on a cost plus job from a fixed price job. Yeah. Number one, on a cost plus job, obviously you can see if we can set those markups to 0, you can vary those markups on the invoice. Why can't you do that on a fixed price job? On a fixed price job, our markups are baked in on these things. So your markups are going to be configured on your estimate. If you do have varying markups, you can handle that on the estimate itself on any of those cost lines. So then that price gets baked in for you when you need it. So I wanted to add.
Very good thing to clarify. Yeah, if you traditionally do like different markups for every single line on your estimate, maybe services are one rate, equipment's another rate. That's generally done as a fixed price contract because we're not marking up different things in different ways. We're just saying it's the cost of the item plus my markup, and the customer only sees the customer price in that case. And a cost plus project is generally a blanket markup on all things. Might be adding some flexibility here in the future with different cost types different markups for different cost types. So, keep an eye out for that, keep an ear out for that. But currently it would be blanket applied unless you can still manually adjust them by line as I showed you guys. So if there's certain things you want to zero out, if you want to zero out your time entries for markup, you can do that. It's just done manually. By default, we apply whatever your project's markup rates are. So just something to be aware of. Fantastic.
I think that brings us basically to the end of the demonstration, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't see any questions. So,
yeah, I would love to make sure that we take at least a second for any of those who held their questions to the end to try to open the floor. Feel free to jump over to that Q&A section, type out a question. We'd love to make sure that we hear from you. Even if you just want to tell us in the Q&A section that we did a great job, awesome. Or if you have any special invoicing situations, we'd love to hear from that in the Q&A section as well, especially if there's a special invoicing situation you want addressed with your coach. This is a great time to make sure that you get that in front of us, and we'll pass that information over to your coach so that they can address your situation one-on-one if we can't cover the entirety of it right now.
Yeah. Actually, Brian, while we're thinking about this and letting people respond, one other thing I wanted to showcase that Chad, our director of CS, had flagged, and I totally forgot to talk about, is what happens if I have created in a fix or in a cost plus project, I've created an invoice. I haven't released it yet, it's still a draft invoice, and I had some extra expenses show up on my project that I want to add onto the invoice. Rather than needing to void and recreate the invoice, what I can do is on the invoice itself, I actually have this little refresh button that says update with latest actuals. And what that will do is it will essentially go back and look at all the bills again, and it will update it with any additional actual bills and expenses that have been added in. It will refresh them on this invoice. So that way you don't have to like void and recreate the invoices. Because every once in a while, I'm sure people have gone and hit the edit icon and been like, hey, where is that one bill I totally just added? You just have to hit the refresh actuals here right on the invoice itself. So just something to be aware of.
That's a good tip, Zach.
Yeah, it's a good one. And 99.9% of you are asking, why is there taxes? Toggle that off. If you have to ask the question, why are there taxes there? You are not one of the builders that applies to because you're not in Washington State, Arizona, or Canada, or I think Massachusetts. So lucky for you, you don't have to deal with sales tax, customer taxes. Um, Consider yourself lucky there because that's always a fun thing to deal with.
Like when tax is concerned, we're all lucky that we're not Canadian. Ah,
Exactly.
gosh.
Paying
PST
tax
and
on, adding
GST and
tax on Marco.
HST and whew.
Awesome.
Hey.
Well, I don't see any other questions jumping in, Marie.
No.
Yeah, we're not seeing any questions, guys. Take the opportunity if you have the chance. Go ahead and get that question in. Even if you just want somebody to make sure that we reach out at another time, feel free to let us know here. You've
Hmm.
got the opportunity, you got the form. We'll leave it open for another couple minutes or so. If we don't start seeing some questions, we'll let you guys have a little bit extra time back in your day. Grab a quick snack before the next task.
Well, if people want to keep adding questions if they want, why don't you go to the last slide, Zach, and I can talk about um, what's coming up.
Of course. Let me pull that up here real quick.
Thank you.
Oh, and one more point, especially for those who are heading out soon and may not catch this last slide, you're going to get a survey at the
Hmm.
end of the webinar, or excuse me, not at the end of the webinar, but tomorrow you should receive that. If you do think of any questions, go ahead and include that on the
Yeah.
survey. We'll get that taken care of with you and your coach.
Yeah, and for those of you that are sticking around to the end, as soon as I hit end, the survey will pop up. So you can go
Oh,
ahead and fill that
excellent.
out. Yeah, but if you leave early, which some quite a few people did leave a little bit early, we that email will go out. So and you will be also be able to fill out the survey. But I wanted to talk about, the survey. There is a question about, future CS office hours, best practices. We really want to hear from you. We are doing these sessions for you as the customers. So please tell us, do you want to hear more about Mason? Do you want to hear more about accounting? We do have some ideas on the horizon, but we do want to hear from you. Like, do you want to talk about selections? Do we, whatever you have an idea for, please answer that question. And then the community forum, please don't forget about it. If you, I don't know if a lot of people know that you can access it through Ressio app. It's in under your profile. So you can get to the community forum. All releases are put in there as well. And you can connect with other builders there. So please go to that space if you haven't already. And then of course our YouTube channel. That's where a lot of our releases go out. And you will be able, there is even a playlist dedicated to feature releases. So when something does come out, the video will show up there first. And then we also have a lot of variety of different playlists depending on your role. Any further questions, just please reach out to your customer success coach. And we really appreciate everyone coming, and the thoughtful questions that you were asking.
Fantastic. All right, I think we're good to call it
Yeah,
wraps, right? Yeah.
I think we
Well,
are.
thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
again,
you.
everybody, for coming and
Thank you,
hanging out with us
Brian
this
and Zach. You
afternoon.
guys did awesome. Appreciate
Hey,
it.
thank you, Marie, for teeing it all up for us.